Hi, Professor. Here's my presentation for the Android application. So I set out to create an Android AR app that allowed users to view 3D models, placed over an image target or a picture, and allow the user to rotate the object and view some detailed information about the anatomy. And so I'll go ahead and get started. I'll just jump into the application. Right now it's called, it's a placeholder title. I'm calling it InsideAR app. But again, I wanted to, I'm brainstorming ideas of creating a title that's a little bit more creative and targeted towards younger audiences, especially middle school, high school kids, elementary school kids, because the goal of this application is to teach children and maybe even adults basic information on human anatomy and maybe learn a little bit about the body. And so when the application first loads, we noticed that we have the title. It's called InsideAR app. There's a simple welcome message, and then a login page, as well as a create account button, and then there's a button on the bottom called do magic. So this do magic button actually allows us to skip past the login page as an admin and to debug the application. So if I hold this button down, we'll see the admin debug button, which once I click will jump right into the application. So instead of doing that, I'll go ahead and create a new account actually, just so I can show you that this is connected to a database. So I'll call this FSU user 2. I previously created one as a test. I'll use the super secret password of password 1. And then the email, I'll just give a random email. I'm just checking for an at and a .com. I'm not checking for the DNS or anything like that. So in the future, I could send a verification email to check and make sure the user is the email is correct or not. So I'll go ahead and create the account and log in as FSU user 2. Password is password 1. I'll log in. And then there we go. So we're logged in, and the first thing we notice on the top, it says welcome FSU user 2. That's being pulled from a data class that's persistent across the entire application, and the data class stores the data about a user, their profile name, their email, and how many credits they have. So the first thing we see on this page here are you have a number of items, anatomy objects that you have in empty boxes for future objects that I could place here. This is also a scroll list, so we could add, this could continue to grow. The other thing we notice is a hamburger menu in the top right corner. When we click this, we see the sign out button and an exit button, as well as credits. So by default, the new user gets 100 credits, and they can use these credits to purchase new anatomy objects. That functionality is not added. So the only thing that we're just showing you is how many credits you have. In the future, I want to be able to allow users to purchase more credits using real dollar amounts, perhaps to use those and then use those credits to unlock specific functionality, maybe training videos or other features of the app, or I may completely get rid of that. So we have right now there's 3D anatomy models that I have: the heart, the brain, and a skull, that I was able to download for free from turbosquid.com, which is a popular website that allows artists to sell 3D objects. So I'll go ahead and click on the brain. So this is the one that I almost fully flushed out for this demo. So you can see the brain being augmented on top of the image. This is the default image that comes with Vuforia, one of the image targets that I'm using. As you see, I rotating that also rotates the 3D object. And then we can also rotate the 3D object just by using touch. And then there's a button called More Info. So if I click and hold down this button and let it load, we'll notice that there's other buttons here, or tags that show you where it is. So this sometimes what happens is that the model disappears because of poor lighting, and I've tested this in natural lighting in my office and other places, and it's less of an issue. So it's mostly here in my home office. So I can rotate this object. I can see, okay, I'm referencing the brainstem down here, the Rolandic fissure is down here. I can even get a little bit closer if I want to. So that's kind of what I wanted to teach. The other thing I wanted to add in the future, which is animation, is the ability to, open up the brain or the anatomy a little bit more. So if they click on Rolandic tissue, the brain might even open up. So this mesh actually has 7 sub-objects, but right now I'm not doing that. That's something to do in the future. So then we can go ahead and close this and keep rotating the object. Another thing you might notice is the rotation is a little bit off. That's because currently I'm doing local rotation and not global rotation, and that's something that needs to be fixed. That's a bug. Local rotation is, also rotating the axis itself. So Y is now facing forward, whereas it should always be facing up, and X should be facing, horizontally, and Z should be facing depth-wise forward and backward. So that's something I need to implement. For now, this is just temporary. So the other buttons on the screen you see are reset objects. If I have this object rotated as such, if I hit that button, self-explanatory, it rotate, fix it, makes the mesh go back to its default position and rotation. And then we can click on items to go back. Click on heart. Here's the heart itself. So this one doesn't have a detailed view. So the more info button doesn't do anything. So this is another bug that you may see here, that just clicking on this is actually triggering the button's invoke function. Whereas what I really want to do is have them the ability to do hold and load, and so that's something that I need to fix. What else? So we can go back here and look at the skull. The skull moves a little bit slower because I forgot to increase the rotation speed on this particular object. So this is a pretty simple fix I can do in a very quick update release. So that's there. We can go back to the profile, and that's essentially it. That's what I was able to complete, and in my proposal, the optimal implementation level is what I feel I achieved, minus a couple of small features such as animation. I'm able to load an object, rotate it, view some detailed information about the object, and that's basically it. So I can go back and exit the application from here. Okay, I hope I covered most of the features of the application, and the documentation also explains a little bit more detail. And I'll be making another video that goes over the IDE, the development platform I use, as well as some code. All right, thank you. All right, so now that I've shown you the demo of the actual application working on the mobile device, I'll go ahead and show you the setup and the platform that I'm using, as well as some code. So I'm using Unity 3D, as I mentioned in my proposal, using version 2017.4.3 F1. This is the one that I'm using at my work as well. So I decided not to upgrade, because there are a lot of new features in 2018 that may or may not break my proposal, and I didn't want to upgrade right now. So I'm using Unity 3D as well as Vuforia, which is which was recently added to the Unity releases. And But for this particular project, I had to download Vuforia separately and install it. And so what we see here are, there's two scenes in Unity: the login scene and the main scene. The login scene is pretty straightforward. I have a login manager script on this game object here that's running and loading this application, this particular scene. There's elements on the screen that allow buttons and edit fields. And then I take that information from the login manager, which is right here. Um, I set the user, and then here's my string URL for the PHP file for logging in for a user. And then there's another script, there's called insert user. And this website, again, RX Biosciences, is my father's website, so I created it using his server. And then we have, here it's basically this function creates the user and inputs it into the server using this particular function right here. The www class here allows Unity to communicate to using HTTP requests, and essentially adds it to the database. And then we'll go back to Unity real quick. I'll be switching between multiple screens just to show you the entire environment here. And so this scene, all this artwork here is free, and I downloaded it from online. Much of it is from Creative Commons, and some of it is from Adobe Stock, which I do have an account for, since I do some freelance work there. So I was able to download this for free. And then we'll go to the main scene here. And so this main scene, as we see here, is the scene that actually does, shows you the profile, which is this canvas up here, and there's the user profile screen here, which I disable and enable in code, and then the HUD is persistent, so it stays there, and the hamburger menu also stays there. So I simply disabled these two game objects here to, that's what we're looking at there. And then the image target is right here. So this is the image target that you saw in the other video that was printed out, and then the meshes are shown on top of that. So we have the different, objects right here: the heart, the brain, the skull, and then the button show UI and hide UI. So this is basically it. So this is and then the manager class here, I called it brain class. Essentially, what this class does is handles the loading and enabling and disabling of the objects. This is pretty simple and basic when it comes to Unity scripting. There's not a whole lot here. There's not doing any coroutines or any sort of complex things here. Simple methods to show anatomy GUI, close anatomy GUI. This is used to show and hide the detailed views of the brain with the different tags, and then hide profile canvas, show profile canvas, load object takes in a string of the anatomy, and this is being invoked from the button on the UI canvas here itself, right here. So these buttons are essentially loading that function once, and then passing in the actual anatomy. Again, I don't want to go too much into detail here. It's pretty straightforward, and I'll zip all this up for you to take a look at. And then, some of the assets, I use 30th Max to export and modify these assets. I had to do some cleanup on these assets, and I've used 30th Max in school and continue to do so as a hobby. So I was pretty familiar with the software. And then the buttons and various other things I created myself in Photoshop. Again, my background is in graphic design, so this is something that I've done in the past. So I had to, create these buttons that were used in the application itself. And that's basically it as far as the environment goes, and how I set this up. There's a couple of the number of scripts I wrote. The rotate object script, pretty straightforward, very simple. It's only 30 lines here, and a lot of it is just empty. It rotates the object. The brain script, like I said, handles everything. The user profile script it does loading of the data for a profile once they're logged in, shows the menu, and also clears user data once somebody logs out. Create user and login manager, and then the two PHP scripts that I also wrote that are here. And I use those same scripts for actually these are the same scripts I created for one of the other sampling technology projects. So that was helpful and useful. I'm using MySQL, so that's the here's PHPMyAdmin backend again. Created a new database called FSU InsideAR. Here's the user we created in the live demo that I showed earlier. FSU user 2, password 1 is the password, and bill@bobby.com. So this is connected to the application, and that's where the database portion comes in. And of course, in the future, I want to implement some more functionality to the database, create multiple tables, and have a relational database, relational connection between those tables to show the number of items the user has, and make that connection there, so that a user, that particular information is also loaded from the database. I still want to make sure that the mesh is localized, because downloading them from the internet could be pretty heavy, and it could take a long time, because AR, it's pretty intensive on the graphics card of the device, and that's because you want to make sure that the lighting and the textures of the objects are really well done, and because of that, the object file size goes up because of texture. So we don't want to get that information and get that data from the internet. We want to store that locally. But what objects that they have, that information will be stored online, the object names themselves. So that's essentially it, and everything else about the application, what's my setup, my documentation, as well as issues I ran into, any bugs and features that I plan on implementing, is all in the documentation in the paper that I'm submitting. All right. Thank you very much.